they live in the mud, you know, like I feel like, you know, you go to the coast and like they're afraid to get dirty. And like in Utah, like we live in the mud.
Yeah.
That's where we make our money.
Let's get into it, man.
Okay.
How did you get into Divvy?
So I was at Jive, which was like an interesting and fun Utah story, mostly bootstrap business.
Jive's an incredible story.
It is.
Actually.
It kind of got buried there because the founders are very just like humble, quiet people.
And it was like an Orem.
Yep.
It was like in this interesting, but it was telephony,
Yep.
which is like, you know, there's not very many people who know how to code in telephony and things like that.
For sure. So I was at Jive, loved it, learned a ton. We sold that business to LogMeIn, $400 million, which back then put us on the board, and now it's like a decent Series B, you know.
Yeah.
But at the time, it was awesome. And so I kind of had this choice of like, go be a part of this larger public company. I was looking at like moving to Boston and kind of being a part of that. And at that time, Blake reached out. We got connected through some kind of mutual investors, and he reached out and pitched me the idea, and I fell in love with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at what point, by the way, this is Blake Murray for those watching or listening, founder of Divvy. At what point did he call you? How many people were there?
So I should know the exact number, but I'm going to guess there were around 15, 20, 25
so super
people.
early.
Yeah, it was early. So this was pre any institutional money. This was Alex and Blake, handful of engineers, handful of other folks kind of around the building. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if you know this. You probably do. I was working at Izeni at the time. I was running Izeni with the Gundersons.
Yep.
And, we built or helped him build that first kind of like MVP of Divvy. It was cool. In fact, I think the name Divvy came out of the dev shop by Izeni in like a whiteboard session.
Did it?
Yeah.
So Blake has always been like, there's not enough focus on that part of the story. He talked about the Gundersons in particular. He's like, they were big time early.
They were
on.
huge.
That was before my time. But I've heard the story.
Yeah, that was fun. It was fun to see that thing. And, you know, you never know what's going to work and what's not going to work and what comes in. That was fun, too. It's probably a lot like your new gig. Back then at Izeni, is like, we just see all these really interesting entrepreneurs who are like, hey, I just raised $250K.
Yep.
What can you build for me? It's like, so we could try to like get more money.
Yep.
And it was fascinating. We saw some really cool companies too, like Weave and folks like that. So anyways, you go in to it at that point, and it's like pre-product, pre-launch.
Yeah.
And at what point, what was your initial role?
So I came in specifically to like run marketing. This is the point where, I mean, I remember clear as day when me and Blake are sitting down, he says, I need an inflection point. Like I'm ready for an inflection point. So that was like my job, right? In the specific
no
title.
Pressure.
Yeah, no pressure. I remember I was sick, like physically ill for the first 3 months.
Oh, geez.
Because you feel that pressure, right? Like you have to make something happen. And if you don't, there's nowhere to hide. There's 20 people, right? So anyway, first job was marketing and first task was inflection. You know, Alex had been doing a lot of the like selling the deck and getting LOIs and like getting the first kind of friends and family together. And then I was like, how do we go add a bunch of folks to this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what did you do?
I did a lot of things wrong. So like at Jive, we'd had certain things that worked, right? In terms of like generating demand. Blake had this phrase. He said, we need to get big fast. So I'm like, okay, how do we get big fast? So I'm like, these are things that worked for us at Jive. Paper lead programs worked really well in telephony. Tried that at Divvy, just hard flop, right? Nothing, didn't work. So I started to write tons of different just ads. And really what I was trying to figure out is like what message is resonating with people. So I wrote 20 a day for like a month. And then I was like quickly seeing which ones were getting the most interest, where were my CPMs the best, where were getting the highest click-through rates. And then when I figured out like which messages were kind of resonating, we started to test in broader swaths and more aggressive bets. So like I contacted a business updates newsletter
Okay.
They weren't like selling ads per se, but I kind of said like, hey, you reach, a little over 1 million people, mostly finance professionals. Can I like write this piece of content and I'll pay you for it? We paid them $1,000. And I remember this goes out on a Sunday morning and we just get bombarded. We had like 800 demo requests that day, something like that. So I was like, okay, we figured something out. We figured out the messaging that's working. We figured out some like places where our audience hangs out. And that was like the first time where I felt like, okay, like we've got something that's working a little bit and we've got some momentum.
Had Divvy figured out the model by then, like how it was going? It actually would be really interesting. I think that was kind of the really innovative thing that Blake and Alex did early on, was the model of that thing, which nobody was doing.
100%. They had figured that out. So it was interchange driven. They had a structure between the bank and, the Visa, the MasterCard card networks, and we're able to offer the software for free and make money, a lot more money even on the interchange model.
Yeah.
Yep.
So once it starts like taking off and you find a message that works, I mean, I don't know that we've ever seen a company grow that fast. What was that like in Utah?
It was really special, especially looking back. In the moment, it felt, it was hell, right? Like every single day, tons of things are broken, tons of things. I'm screwing up left and right. It feels like everyone's screwing up left and right. But we were doing a lot of things well at the same time. And it was like 0 to like a $400 million run rate in the span of, 5-6 years. Depending on where you count it. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd.
Has anyone ever done that in Utah before?
Not to my knowledge. And
I wonder if Podium got close at one point. That's the only one that I can think of, like there was a rapid rise like that.
Yeah.
But I think Divvy's the only one I can think of.
I think businesses in Utah that are doing 400 today, I don't even know how, there's just not that many of them.
Are there? They don't know. Probably count it on one hand.
I think you probably can.
Yeah, that's so fascinating.
Yeah.
And so what did you learn about growth and how to grow from super small pre-product all the way to a $2.5 billion exit to Bill.com, which is the craziest thing ever. Yeah. By the way, all of this happens within 5 years.
It really does. I remember we were at your office in Silicon Slopes. You were interviewing Blake. You said, come back when you're a unicorn. And 6 months later, we had a unicorn, round of funding, and it happened insanely fast.
Yeah.
I learned a ton, mostly because of just stupid mistakes and things that I would do different now. But one of the biggest is how much speed and intensity matter if you're trying to do something like that in a short amount of time. Every time we talked, we couldn't afford to talk in quarters.
Yeah.
We frankly couldn't really even afford to talk in months. We're talking in weeks and days, and what can we get out the door? What can we change? What can we affect? And so speed was absurd. And that's another reason why it felt so hellacious. It's because that was just pressure every second of every day. Learned a lot about that. Learned a lot about it's all a people game. Every single thing. When we had good people and taking ownership of stuff, we did well. When we didn't, we failed. It was all about people, speed, and the intensity of the group. Yeah,
you said a couple times hey, we made a lot of mistakes and that type of stuff, but that's kind of the beauty of it. How was the org set up and the decision-making process set up to where you could make mistakes? And because I could see so many times companies like that have all these opportunities. You get in a conference room and you're what if we did this? What if we did this? And then by the end of the day, you're oh, let's talk about it tomorrow.
For sure.
Right?
So this is a lot of Blake's genius, frankly, is he hired people, put them in roles. The objectives were clear among the group. And then it was a lot of you come back and talk to me as you need a thought partner, but your job's to go do stuff, not talk about stuff, not get a bunch of people together and create consensus. Your job is to complete the objectives. And if you do that, you're going to be in a good spot. And if you don't, we're going to have hard conversations. Yeah. And so in a lot of ways, it just drove, it pushed down the ability to make decisions, and that created, an environment where mistakes were okay as long as we were getting the job done at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And the fact that worked, because sometimes you can kind of overcorrect and let's just make as many mistakes as possible.
For sure.
It's hey, that's not really the point. The point isn't to fail.
I don't like the mistakes. Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, like that interesting balance. What did you learn from Blake through all of this?
You know what's funny is, in the moment, I swear what people do to leaders is it's just so easy to like nitpick, right? And then you separate yourself for a minute and you're like, man, was that guy like a genius? Was he like playing on another level? I learned a lot about how to hire and trust. And how you set up the systems that like create the accountability, but there was an awful lot of like trust in his executive team. He hired, like Casey Bailey, who came from Uber and then did Divvy and now is at Deal, like a $12 billion company. Like she was a rock star, a people rock star. Blakely Cragen, Tyler Hogue, like some of these people were absolute masters in their domain. Blake recruited them, set the tone and the pace and the objective, let them do their job. And I probably didn't appreciate how rare that was until I've been separated from it a little bit and gotten to talk to a bunch of other companies that don't function that way. But that was probably my biggest learning. I'll give you another one, because I think in Utah we have a cardinal sin, and the cardinal sin is like thinking too small.
Right.
Blake never thought too small. No. The guy was absolutely thinking massive and fast and big. And that's just who he was. So I think those were two of like my biggest takeaways.
Yeah. Why do you think we think too small in Utah? Or is that a Utah thing, or is that just like a general thing? It does seem more prevalent here in the state.
All right. Well, let's see if I can get in trouble here. I think that culturally, we're a lot more about balance. And I'm not even saying that that's a good thing or a bad thing. But like when you're trying to balance a lot of stuff, it almost precludes those really extreme outcomes. Because that was not a 40-hour work week, right? For anybody involved. I swear, anybody involved at any level. And so we were able to do something a little bit, hopefully bigger in a shorter time frame. I also think that we got comfortable with emotion in Utah, which is like we build a really good business, we get it to a certain size, and then we sell it, right? And that became like the pattern in a lot of ways. And then you certainly have outliers. You have the Qualtrics's who were doing different things, but like we are as good as anybody at having like $1 billion business. Yeah. We're not as good as other places at like having enduring public companies that,
like generational companies.
Exactly.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Like, why don't we have generational companies? This has actually come out a decent amount in this podcast already. Like, we need to build generational companies.
We really do. It's what's missing. Yeah. And I think we have the skill set. Sometimes to me, Clint, it comes down to like, do you love the game? Do you want to do the thing for 20 years, or is it really about creating a lot of value and then enjoying that value? And I think that's a choice that every founder makes individually for themselves. But Utah as a whole, I think we've more opted towards like, I'm going to get it to a certain point and then I'll let somebody else do it. But do we love building businesses? If you do it for 20, 30 years and you enjoy it every step of the way.
Yeah, the only commonality I've ever found from like the really successful founders, right? Like the Ryan Smiths, the Blake Murrays, the Josh Jameses, the list goes on and on, right? Is like pure tenacity. Yeah. Pure like, I will not fail no matter what. And the only thing that I can promise you is we will never die.
Yes. Yes.
And that's the only, because they all have different leadership styles and all that type of stuff, but that is the commonality through all of them.
And so let me ask if you've noticed this too.
Yeah.
Do you feel like they're also at their best when things are at their worst?
Yeah. Oh,
that's the other thing that to me was like always amazing is like when we were knocking on death's door, which happened, several times, that's when Blake was at his best. Right. Yeah. That's when he was an absolute otherworldly leader. Right. And I'm sure that's true for Ryan, Josh, and everybody else that we kind of revere. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, for sure. There is something where like when it's going bad, it's like, all right.
Yep.
We're going to be up all night. Let's go.
They're almost more comfortable when it's bad than when things are all going really, like when things are going really well, they're like nervous. They're like, where's a problem? Where's a problem? But when things are terrible, they know what the problem is. They're like, okay, time to dig in.
Oh yeah. We have really good wartime CEOs here in the state.
For sure.
Of Utah where it's like, all right, let's freaking do this.
they live in the mud, you know, like I feel like, you know, you go to the coast and like they're afraid to get dirty. And like in Utah, like we live in the mud.
Yeah.
That's where we make our money. So
how did you guys avoid mission creep? Because this is another thing that I think Utah companies fail at a little bit or maybe struggle with sometimes. And that is like trying to do too many things, add too many features.
Yeah.
You know, trying to add all these, like, so you see something, one thing works, like, all right, that worked. Now let's move on to the next thing. It's like, no, pour more gas on that, the thing that's working.
I think our targets kept us extremely balanced. There was like no room for anything else.
Yeah.
And by the way, like you could make the case that, you know, compound startups as they start to get more popular, like what Parker Conrad's doing at Rippling, I think a lot about that. And how do you create focus while also doing the things that can make you a really big business? But specifically for us at Divvy, our targets took all of our focus and effort and energy, everything from product and R&D to everything on the go-to-market side, and it kept us remarkably focused. You might argue like, you know, too focused. We could have built a you know, multi-product platform or whatever, but the targets just kept us so focused, and I love that.
You could have, and maybe like the value would have grown 10, 15 years, but there's no way the value grows
100%.
as quickly as it did. I mean, this was a 5-year turnaround, was it not? This was from $0 worth of value to $2.5 billion in 5 years.
Yep.
I know that's never happened in the state of Utah before.
No,
there's no question.
And I haven't actually found it, Clint, in B2B SaaS anywhere.
Yeah, it's crazy.
I've spent like, you know, an unholy amount of time like looking at it. I think it's like one of one.
That's so wild.
It's crazy.
So you started in marketing, but that's not like you held all sorts of different roles, right?
Yeah, so kind of expanded. So started in marketing. Then we basically had this theory between, you know, Blake, myself, and some others that the unification of revenue was going to help us grow faster. So we lumped marketing, sales, implementation, customer success, customer support, and RevOps. And that was revenue for us. And that was the team that I got to work with. Yep.
So you were the CRO throughout this. Yeah, which is, again, that's the crazy position to be in. That's the deep position to be in, to kind of see that growth. I mean, how stressful did it get some weeks?
I mean, I was in the hospital 3 times, you know, had all kinds of different like problems. It was the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. Like, by many multitudes.
Like stress got you? Like what was it?
So like I ended up having like upper GI bleeding. That again, you know, like as you sit down with doctors, they're like, they don't know exactly what's causing it. I'm like, I know.
Yeah.
Like I haven't slept, I've been stressed, and I eat like crap. Like it takes everything you can give it, right?
Yeah.
And guys like me who aren't the sharpest tools in the shed, we have to give a little more, you know? And so when you ask how stressful it was some weeks it landed you in the emergency room, you know?
That is so crazy.
Yeah.
What about during the pandemic? That had to have been a super interesting time for Divvy.
Very. I mean, you know, overnight revenue drops by 30%. We're unsure how businesses are going to be, right? Then again, you know, the leadership, you know, Blake and Alex, they start getting tied in with this PPP program. And we come up with the idea that we can actually be the first company to digitally distribute these PPP loans because we have that relationship with our customers. And so in one of the most insane company like bonding events I've ever heard of, we build that product, ship that product, and start getting people you know, the PPP loans. And yeah, it was a fascinating time.
And that like saved the company, did it not? Like, because all the other business had part of the business must have slowed down quite a bit.
Slowed down a ton.
Yeah.
So we focused on that. It went really well. By the way, it ended up helping us reputationally, I think more than I would have ever guessed. But the fact that we were just trying to help these small businesses, people remembered that for years.
Yeah.
They would come back for years. Just because we were there faster and trying to be more helpful. Not that we didn't have hiccups, but like it was special. And then it kind of bridged the gap because very quickly, as we know, the economy like kind of jump started and it got really busy on the core business.
Sure.
But yeah, it kind of bridged a gap for us. And it also like helped us mentally to just know what we were charging at while the other stuff sorted itself out.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think it really helped another Utah company, their reputation, Lendio.
100%.
Like Lendio really knocked that out of the park
They
too.
did. They really did.
And I think it's really helped them now, and that thing's becoming a monster.
Well, it's like, who are you, right? And there was a lot of companies who just kind of like sat and waited. And we were like, well, we think we can add some value here. Like, let's go try and add value. And that became something that stuck with our brand.
Yeah, for sure. So what were the conversations like about selling? Like, what was for at the executive team, those meetings with the executive team? It was like, hey, and I'm sure you got tons of offers prior to the Bill.com one, but what about the Bill.com one was exciting and interesting?
Yeah. So, and it was a fascinating time. Because we loved our business, we loved what we had built, and we felt very confident in it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you're having those discussions. And at the end of the day, like, the founders get to decide what they want to do with their business. And Blake saw a pretty remarkable opportunity with a strategic partner. He's like, he kind of explained it this way: is like, this is the chess move. Right. Mm-hmm. We've got all these other, this competitive landscape out here. Nobody will have this sort of complete offering. Right. And, it's at a great price. It's going to be good for employees and investors and all these things. And it's going to like put us in a really good strategic position going forward to like win, to be the winner in the market. Yeah. Which I think you've seen kind of play out when you look at Brex and, some of these other guys. Like, I mean, Divvy does more top line revenue. Divvy has better margins as a part of, the broader Bill entity. But like, I think it played out.
Yeah. How did you guys think about competitors, in particular Brex, which was like this really heavily Silicon Valley funded, Silicon Valley supported, like your typical, like, this is going to be the company that wins this space. And then they must have been like, what is going on in Utah? How are they eating our lunch over there? How did you think of that?
Oh,
by the way, Brex ended up opening like an office here and stuff like that, which was like, there's no way they do that if Divvy is not rolling.
Well, two things. One, I think Divvy. Two, I think it's a testament to like some of the talent that's in the state, right? That like anybody can recognize that. It's remarkable to me the amount of Bay Area companies that have a significant part of their operations here. Everyone from like Carta to ChargeBee to Sword Health, but we were very aware of Brex. I think they pushed us to be the best version of ourselves, because I think they did a lot of things very well. But really, we kind of viewed them as like, hey, they're going to go try and get all the other startups, and we're going to go to Main Street America. And we thought that was the winning strategy. We thought it was harder. It was a harder problem to solve because they're tougher to underwrite. They have different needs. Whereas if you're just selling to venture-backed startups day in and day out, like, you can get pretty good at that. Yeah. So we paid attention to them, but we felt like our strategy and vision was like different and superior.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting you brought up Parker Conrad. I remember like when he built like Zenefits, that was a fast rise. Also pretty fast fall.
It sure was. Yep. Sure was.
For like, and he has his story about that, and Sachs and crew have their other story on that. But the fact that he just did that again, I mean, what about these founders like him, again, like Blake, why do you keep going? Like, what's the point?
Well, Parker's pissed. He's angry. He wants to prove what Zenefits would have become, and he wants to prove everybody who like booted him out of that business that they were idiots, right? Yeah. And not only that, but these founders, it seems like business is their sport.
Yep.
It's where they get their competitive juices from, their creativity, a lot of their fulfillment. And look at like Josh, could have been done after Omniture, but he keeps doing these things. It's because they love it, right? Yeah. Or they're addicted to it, one or the other.
I was talking to one of them, and they were like, when I wasn't CEO for a while, my phone stopped ringing, and I felt irrelevant. Mm-hmm. Well, that sounds amazing. Yeah. Well, why you don't like that?
Yeah, not to these guys, right?
Like, they're like, no, I need that. It's very cool. The first time, I didn't know Parker Conrad, but I obviously knew about Zenefits, and then the state of Utah. I don't know if you remember this. Passed a law where Zenefits can operate in the state, and like I think we were doing BI startups at the time. we like wrote like these things, and we started talking to Parker, and we had him come speak at Stardust LC.
Yeah.
And I remember like this huge, I mean, he was a huge figure
Yeah.
at that point because of what he'd built. It was like the fastest growing SaaS
Yep.
company of all time, but at that point. And, you know, he comes in there and he's just like, it's normal. And he's like, I'm so effing, like, he really was. It was like a competitive thing. Like he flew all the way to Salt Lake to speak at our event because he was like, F anyone who tries to get in my way. And then like sooner, I actually think he got bounced in the meantime, and Sachs came and did the bill signing. But that whole thing was crazy, man.
I mean, startups are insane.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I know, you know, Parker and Sam Blond was the head of sales at Zenefits at the time. And like, you know, like you said, meteoric rise, challenges, meteoric decline. And then, you know, he takes all of this knowledge and rage and starts rippling, which, you know, I think rippling's going to be an absolutely massive business. But yeah, they're built different.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you go to Bill.com for a bit, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
After the acquisition.
Yep.
What was that like working for a company like that?
You know, integrations are challenging because company cultures, it's like DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And when you try to like match DNA, it's a challenge for any business that I've ever talked to at all, right? But I would say that there were just well-intentioned, smart people everywhere. On both sides of that acquisition, and lots of learnings because, you know, the discipline of a public company and a company that had been around for, you know, 17, 18 years at the time. It's like there's a lot of stuff that we could learn that I felt like I learned, which is great.
And then you bounce out of there, and you're looking at what to do next. I'm sure you're getting VCs calling you up like, hey, start some, you know, all that type of stuff. Because again, like, you were just part of the fastest growing thing ever. What made you decide to go to Pelion? I think that's because I remember, I think we were at a jazz game together.
Yeah.
And, you know, you were thinking about, you hadn't made that decision yet.
No, I hadn't. And honestly, it was tough. Cause I definitely put myself in the camp of people who like, I just love to build. I just want to be building. I want to be engaged in like trying to do something big. Right. So it's like, do you go take a job at a company? Do you try and start something, like do the founder thing, like the ultimate experience? And really, like I started having a lot of conversations with Pelion and their vision for Utah, what Utah could be, their role in that started to get me really excited. And I also was able to kind of carve out some uniqueness in my role where like I can spend some serious time with some of these companies and feel like I'm on the building side. So that was why Pelion, and I think they're just they have a tremendous platform to like, they care about the same things that I care about. Yeah. So that, and just great people. That's the other thing is like, you just realize the longer you go, you just want to work with great people who you like. Yeah. And I found a lot of them over there.
Yeah, you're working with another Blake M.
That's right. I guess I just like working for guys named Blake.
Yeah, he was here just last week and talking to him. What a legend. Uh-huh. And what a legendary ride and company. Yep. And I mean, but again, like we're throwing out a lot of kind of crazy statements here, but far and away the best venture fund that could ever come out of this state.
Yes.
Right.
And I think, one of the only firms that can compete with like the returns of Bay Area funds.
And has the reputation with them too.
Absolutely.
Right? Like they know Pelion out there, which is really cool. So since you've been at Pelion, what's been the most fun?
Founders they're our heroes. They're just heroes. And you get to talk to them all day, every day. Yeah. And, whether you decide to invest or get involved is almost irrelevant. Like that's contagious. Mm-hmm. And so that's been the most fun for sure. And in a close second is like sitting down and trying to figure out how do we start to use our resources, our platform to like to make Utah the best place to live and work.
Mm-hmm.
And so between those two things, it's a blast.
Yeah, you guys have done like launched this like Build Utah campaign,
Yep.
and you've got these billboards, which again is like, and you were known for that even
Yeah.
at Divvy, right? Like instead of having Divvy as the billboard, you would put your customers up.
Yep.
Genius move,
Yeah.
by the way,
No,
just a
appreciate that.
genius move.
Thanks.
And then, well, it made like business sense on the Divvy side. Like now you're just doing it for community and for awareness, and so it's even like more admirable and noble now. How did you convince them? Like, hey, we should do this, because I know that was you.
Yeah, no, I mean, we were there, right? And talking to Blake and the partnership, and how do we stock our own pond with fish? How do we make Utah a better place for businesses to start and grow and succeed? And it was like, well, how can we leverage a lot of the great firms that are here? So we reached out to almost all of them. It's Kickstart, it's Epic, it's all these groups. And we're like, hey, if we did this, would you want to help us figure out who to spotlight? And it's not just going to be the companies that we fund. We want to do the companies that you fund and all that stuff. And everyone, the reception was really good. And then, you take it to the founders, and, they're super grateful. Like, building businesses is so brutally hard.
Yeah.
Anything you do to support or encourage is like, it's like manna from heaven, you know? And so between kind of like articulating all that, it was kind of a no-brainer for the Pelion partnership.
And it's been like super successful. And by the way, this is a good time to plug your podcast, which is incredible.
Oh, thanks.
By the way.
Yeah.
The one you do with Tyler.
Yeah.
What was the idea? It's kind of same type of thing?
Exactly.
Or give resources to companies and their founders?
And we had another, you mentioned it earlier in the conversation, which is like, how do we get Utah to think bigger? It's like, well, we need to bring in some of these voices.
Mm-hmm.
So it hasn't launched yet, but we just got done recording with Keith Raboy, right? Keith.
Legend.
Oh my gosh. Like, the guy is unreal.
Did you want to move to Miami after?
No, but I wanted him to move to Utah. And I'm like, this is the thinking, right?
Yeah.
This is the thinking. This is the muscle. He was telling a story about, when he gave $800K to Brian Chetsky before anyone knew who Airbnb was. And he's, YouTube early investment. And then now, I mean, they're doing Varda. They're doing manufacturing in space, like the scale at which they think. And so Tyler and I sat down, like, again, how do we help founders? And it's like, well, can we talk to these people who are incredible, both inside and outside of the state? And that was kind of the genesis. But it very much same line of the podcast. Everything that we're talking about is under this like Build Utah umbrella. Yeah. And how do we do a better job?
Well, what I love about what you're doing is you're bringing people in from outside the state, and one, making them aware of everything that's happening in the state.
Yep.
And you're like reaching a broader audience too, because everyone wants to listen to what Keith Raboy has to say,
Totally.
right? And these folks. And so you're building like, oh, that podcast is from Utah? That's cool.
Yeah, well,
that's actually a great idea.
I appreciate that, and I hope we keep it up. It has been an absolute blast so far.
That's cool.
Yeah.
How do you think founders and CEOs and leaders are managing mental health right now?
I think it's hard. I think it's a constant kind of struggle, especially that at the very top. Who do you talk to? You can't complain to your employees. You can't do it. You don't really want to do that to your investors because they're kind of always underwriting you, and so I think it's the loneliest place in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as like how they're managing it, I think we're doing better. I think you and a lot of people are doing a better job of like, hey, this stuff's going on. This stuff's real. Like, we should talk about it. We should deal with it like head on. But it's a challenge.
Yeah, it's crazy. What do you think the state of startups and tech is right now? Like the early stage in the state of Utah? Because there was this magical time, the Divvy time.
Yeah.
When Divvy started going and
Podium, route,
yeah, that was
like
magical.
Tax bit, yeah.
I don't get the sense it's like that right now, but I could be like too far away from it too.
So I don't think you're wrong. I think we're gonna see over the next like 6 to 12 months a lot of really cool things happen. there was a crop and a cohort that was like, did we just have like 8 unicorns like in one batch? And I don't feel like that now, but there are a handful of companies that are in their early infancy that I'm like, they're gonna be bigger than Divvy. They can be bigger. They have the potential to be bigger than Divvy. Yeah.
What about like AI? What are you seeing in the AI space? Are we gonna lead out on that here in the state? Are we? Because that seems like a very Silicon Valley, Stanford type of a thing.
Our DNA, I don't believe has ever been like words like the R&D innovation. Yeah. We typically like see how a technology plays out and then go build businesses against use cases, and then we use like this phenomenal go-to-market muscle to like build something that's really cool. And but again, like we have ex OpenAI talent. We have NVIDIA talent. We have some of those things. And like we've seen some pretty freaking cool businesses. So like I would say that maybe historically I wouldn't have been super like bullish on AI in Utah, but like I think there's some companies and some founders out there who can make it interesting.
We're getting more diverse in terms of the companies that we can start and push out of here, because it used to be just B2B SaaS.
Absolutely.
And we're probably still the best at that.
I agree.
In the whole world. I don't think anybody competes with us, right?
For sure.
I don't know why Lemkin doesn't do his SaaSter in Utah.
He needs
It's the SaaS capital of the world, man. Come on out here. Anyways, but now we're doing like consumer and like tourists, which Walking Shaw's doing, and like these like incredible, like that is a new thing for us.
It is. It's new. And I think it like is the natural evolution as we keep getting like, you kind of nail one thing, you venture out into the new frontier. And I think we're seeing that there, but there's big B2C bets being made. There's big, like you're saying, hardware. Like
the hardware.
That's hard. That's brutal.
By the way, Traeger is like an example of that. Like that's a tech company at this point. You do it all in your app and, figuring that out. And
so, I mean, and one of the best businesses in Utah that nobody knows about is Live View Technology, which again, software and hardware are getting paired up. Nate Walkinshaw, Taurus, like, so yeah, you're starting to see, like you're saying, that diversity kind of eke out a little bit.
What roadblocks are ahead? What rain clouds do you see that we should be aware of to maybe try to avoid?
I worry a lot about how can we sort of build the up and coming generation, right? How do we get every success story to spit out the next 10? And we don't have infrastructure for that, right? We don't have a Y Combinator. And there's groups like Silicon Slopes and others that do a really good job.
Yeah, but we're not YC.
Yeah, and I'm not Paul Graham, right? Like, or Jessica Livingston. But like, I think that's the thing that scares me the most is how do we cultivate a continual cohort that can take the handoff, right? So you kind of had, Josh and Ryan, Todd, and, Aaron in this first. And then you had Blake and Eric and, Evan, some of these Brandon Rodman, some of these folks. And I worry like 2 layers below. It's like, who are they and what are we doing to give them every opportunity to like make sure every wave is bigger than the last.
Yeah.
So it's not money. We have enough VC in the state for the good companies
for sure, which is great.
But I don't think we have like the infrastructure.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? That's interesting. I always wonder like how good are we at surrounding entrepreneurs with everything that they need? And where are we falling short? And because it used to be money. Like when we started Silicon Slopes, it was like, we need to like let investors know that there was tech, a strong tech community here in the state of Utah. Like that was the goal. It's like awareness, bring some talent, bring some capital to the state of Utah, right? Mission accomplished there. Yep. Now it's like a different game. It's about surrounding entrepreneurs and fostering kind of like the next generation.
100%. I worry now more about, do we have enough good companies for how much money the state gets as opposed to what it's been for the past couple decades. It was like the inverse, right? Blake Maude was starting. There was nobody was writing checks into Utah. Guys like Todd and Josh and Ryan are like, well, we probably should take a look. And then now I worry about the other problem. And your question is like, why? I wish we were all better at having kind of a it's us against the world mindset. I don't know that we are great yet at everybody does a good job within their organization.
Yeah.
And we don't like reach out outside of that as much as I'd like to see.
Well, we have this thing, like I wrote an article in the Deseret News. Actually, this is funny that you bring that up. Prior to Tech Summit.
Okay.
And when you send a thing, an op-ed or whatever you call it, you don't get to choose the title,
Okay.
right? And so the title of my article that they chose for me is like, the last thing Silicon Slopes needs is competition, or something like that. It's like something like Silicon Slopes hates competition or something. And then my article is like saying like the exact opposite. Like, and I'm speaking specifically about our organization, which is a nonprofit. What do we care?
Yeah.
Our only goal is, again, like, let's surround entrepreneurs with everything they need to be successful at this point. And so we got like, hey, actually, you should have tons more competitors. And like, it's like, yeah, great, but like, that's not why we're in the game, right?
Sure.
We're not in this game to like be the best nonprofit. Like, it's a weird thing to like want to be anyways, right? Yep. And so I do think we do this thing, and it's interesting. Like, we do this thing at the community level where it's like, all right, I need to pull a chunk off of this. I need to pull a chunk out of this. I'm going to have like my kind of like where I'm the king of the kind of like a smaller community and those types of stuff. So we have the challenge there, which is okay. I'm sure that exists everywhere. But I think at the startup level, we have this thing where a startup will do something innovative and interesting, right? And a company will start to see some success. And then there's like 10 other, it's like, oh, that works. I'm going to try that. I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
That's really weird. I think that might be a Utah thing.
It definitely could be. And you're hitting on an interesting point, which is like we have in a lot of ways a mentality around like a local maximum. And it's like when something good happens over here, it doesn't mean something bad happened to me.
Yeah.
And like I can be super, super stoked for you. In fact, I should be. Because as a state, as our reputation, as we attract better talent and better operators, better investors, it's like I want that.
Yeah.
Like again, Divvy was awesome, and I got to work on it. But I am so excited for the company that comes and does it better. We need that. We desperately need that. And so, like you said, you didn't start Silicon Slopes to be like, we're the best and only nonprofit. No, you started it because you wanted to help the mission. Yeah. And so anybody who helps with that is your friend. They're not your enemy.
We don't care at all. Too. It's like we'll get like calls like, "Hey, are you okay if we do?" Well, great. Yeah. Like the one less thing for us to do. What do we care? Like, this is awesome. The more people, the better.
And they're helping execute on a vision that you set many, many years ago.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing needs to be true for our tech companies, and it's not, right? Like when we would have a good thing happen to us, we'd hear the scuttlebutt, and people are saying weird stuff. I'm like, man. Just weird to not like be happy for each other. And I think Utah can do a better job of that. And if we do, I think it allows for more cross-pollination at like the people who are earlier on in their journey. They'll see it. They'll be able to build something a lot bigger and better than what any of us have so far.
Yeah, maybe I'm being nostalgic and looking through rose-colored glasses and all of this is just fine. But there was something beautiful about that era, like starting in about 2012, 2013. Where all of those CEOs and founders who were competing for talent, they were competing for capital, they were competing for attention, and sometimes even in a similar space, right? They were in a room together.
Yeah.
That was beautiful.
I wish we had more of that, for sure.
Yeah, like they were in a room together talking about, hey, and by the way, like the beauty of like, one of the cool things that I've started to realize recently about kind of like the founding group of Silicon Slopes is maybe the best thing to come out of that was those 5 people being in a room together that often, right? And feeding off each other and learning from each other and giving each other advice and building something together that wasn't about their companies. That was pretty beautiful. I would love to see more groups. Again, I don't want Silicon Slopes to do it. We have plenty, but like, I would love to see more of that type of stuff happen rather than these silos. When we build these silos, it's just not.
It just lowers your ceiling.
It actually kind of weakens everyone. Yeah.
It just lowers your ceiling individually, and it lowers our collective ceiling as like a state. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, anytime it's more like, I don't like the founders with backwards hats or something. I was like, all right, so now you got 15% of the community instead of 100.
That's right.
Like, what do you want?
It just doesn't make any sense.
Now you've got,
right?
you just.
And by the way, it doesn't mean you have to agree on everything
Exactly.
or that you're not going to compete. It's like, but know that I win when you, like, we can all win together. By the way, it's one of the things that like is amazing to me about Silicon Valley. They are such proponents. Somebody has a new product, a new idea.
Mm-hmm.
They rush to be the first users and give feedback
Yes.
and like help. And us, we're like, well, you know, if you don't die, like maybe you can call me in a couple years and get my advice. It's like,
Or we'll copy it.
that's right, or we'll rip it
Which
off.
is the
and
craziest
try
thing.
and murder you. It was, it's fascinating for sure.
It's fascinating. What about Utah LFG? You kind of like became known for that. You were making these like LinkedIn posts, and your hashtag was Utah LFG. By the way, you're like a huge LinkedIn influencer.
Weird.
Dude. That's crazy.
Yeah, super weird. So I believe that companies are successful when people root for them like they root for their favorite sports team, right? And the idea for it's kind of was originally born out of like, how do we get more people to root for Divvy and to want us to succeed and to feel like they're on the same team as us? It's like, I don't have anything to do with the Jazz winning or losing, but dude, I sure feel like it. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I feel like I do. Absolutely. How do I get people to feel like that for Divvy? And I was like, well, we should be the champion of like other people's successes. And it's like, well, where do you start? It's like Utah. Like Utah in what we can do and what we can become. It was kind of the genesis for that. So it's like anytime anyone's doing something cool, I want to be shouting it from the rooftops. Whether that helps or not is almost irrelevant. Like I want to do it. But what you realize is that then people want to see you support. And then, you know, we turned it into a way to like raise some money.
For like charities, right?
For causes. And that again is just kind of a fun thing that like, it's kind of a win-win-win. Yeah. And we've had a blast.
Yeah, it's UtahLFG.com, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people should go check that out. And you have all this cool swag and stuff. The swag's cool.
We like it.
Actually, way cool.
Yeah,
I love it. I could never figure out the swag over here.
It's tough.
I'm bad at the swag
It's
stuff.
tough, yeah.
Well, should we put our logo on a hat? I mean, I don't. Who would want to wear our logo? Well, I don't even know if I want to wear our logo.
It's real easy to do swag poorly.
Yeah.
But again, I think Utah, like there's some companies, I'm like, that is some good looking swag out there. You ever seen podium swag? Stuff's fire.
Yeah, Qualtrics swag.
Qualtrics, amazing.
Next level too. Right. It's incredible. What do you think from like a state leadership, political perspective that could be that they're doing well or we could be doing better?
I think we are super fortunate. I think Spencer is doing a lot of the right things. He's engaging in a lot of the right debates. He consults with people. Like I know he looks at you as somebody who has a pulse on like the tech community and like you have some influence there. I think that is 100% the right way to lead. He also, you know, manages to get people from both sides of the aisle pissed at him, which usually means you're doing a pretty good job,
sure.
You know. I think we're business friendly. I think that we are addressing some of our concerns around you know, water and air quality and some of those kinds of things. Infrastructure to me is going to be like a big issue going forward if we want to keep growing. And then, you know, if I could like just list out, you know, like my wants, it's what are we doing to like continue to make this the best place to live and work? And like, what does the roadmap look like? What are the big things that we could go chunk off so that people are coming here from other places, which I think we've done an okay job of, but how do we do more? How do we do better? But honestly, is there any governor I would take over ours? I think the answer is no.
I don't think so.
Straight up. Number 1 out of 50.
Yeah, he's great. The legislature seems to be aware and, you know, for the most part on the right path. Yeah, we're pretty lucky to live here.
We are.
It's kind of crazy.
We can do better. I'm not like, and I can name out 10 of the reasons how, but like we are freaking lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. Finally, how long are you going to do this? What's your plan? What's the future like?
Well, we'll see if Blake Maud's listening to this. You know, I think a lot of that's TBD. I am in the best spot I could be in for today, and I don't know what I don't know what that looks like. going forward.
You got a front row seat to the next wave.
Yeah.
Like with that fund, with those people, it's a dream team. In the same way that Blake Murray built a dream team at Divvy, it just seems like Pelion has built this dream team again, and it's a kind of unbelievable.
I agree, and I think when you think about opportunities, like just watch where the talent's going.
Yeah.
Which company's doing well, just watch where the talent's going. And that'll give you a pretty good indication about how the future looks.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I agree. Thanks for coming in, man.
Hey, thanks for having me.
That was fun.
And thanks for all you do. I mean, in the movement that got started with Silicon Slopes, that is something that, again, people who weren't paying close enough attention don't understand how hard that was. And now it's like this big thing that we all kind of take for granted. It's like, that was blood, sweat, and tears. So anyway, we're all appreciative of what you and the team have done.
I appreciate you saying that. There was a bunch of people who did it. Yeah, it's that's what made it beautiful, right? It's like so many people can claim credit for it, as they should.
Totally.
Thanks, brother.
Okay, appreciate it.
See you, man.
See ya.